Sweating in a bear suit. Sweating in a bear suit. I am sweating in a bear suit. Sweating in a bear suit and having lots of fun with my sweat.
Hello! Welcome to Sweating in a Bear Suit. This is the podcast that Steph and I do as part of our work with Playgrounded, where we talk about leadership and things. Over the course of its life, we have tried to find a strapline that defines what it is that we do, and often Steph comes up with something vaguely related. And the look on Steph's face says he's come up with something great.
Yes,
Steph,
I have. I've got two strap lines. Can I put them both past you? All right.
You don't want to save one for next
No,
time?
because I'm proud of both of them. I
right.
think one of them's a bit better than the other, but I like them both, so I'm going to say them both. So here is the strap line that would come after a very successful, internationally renowned podcast called Sweating in the Bear Suit. You'd go, sweating in a bear suit, and then you'd say these words. You'd say, sweating in a bear suit. Get sweaty, getty sweaty spaghetti.
Right.
Do you know? I'm working on that, like, ready, steady spaghetti. You know when you're doing a race? That's what I was going for. Getty sweaty spaghetti. Yeah.
Does that translate outside of rural Australia?
Probably not.
Possibly not.
So
Maybe not that one. What was your other one?
Okay. I don't quite know how the lead into this one goes, but I'm working on a food thing. So you'd go sweating in a bear suit. Are
you hungry today?
Yeah. Sweating in a bear suit. It's like your favourite sandwich, the BLT. It's business, leadership, talkie time.
Oh, I quite like that because I love a BLT.
Ah,
business
okay.
leadership. I feel like you've failed because you've actually found one that I like, which was not the point of the exercise.
But you must always ceremonially say...
Not that one. Next week. Keep trying.
Ah.
Something along those lines. Okay. But it's good to know that BLT did land.
Yeah, okay, good. That's good. All right, great.
Fabulous. So today we wanted to talk about leadership and decision-making, responsibility and authority.
Yes, we did. And what an interesting lead in, because you've led into the fight that you and I often have. Because I would call this authority. I would just call it authority. And often, you and I clash over the use of the word authority to describe decision-making, responsibility, and authority within an organisation. How do we recreate the intellectual stoush that we have all the time over this word?
My summary of the reason we have it. We have this Play State Peach framework, which is designed to help leaders take action around things that they can control in order to help create the conditions for people to play with their work. My argument is that decision-making and responsibility is something you can build something around. You can control to a certain extent. You can have a ritual around decision-making. You can have a very clear, defined list of responsibilities. And so it's in the boundary layer of what our peach is. Those are my arguments. I have never said that authority is a bad word or that it doesn't exist. But when you say authority, it's attached to things like confidence and whether or not you feel authorized to step into your authority and make the decisions, which is less tangible than in my role I am responsible for the finance department's success and therefore I am responsible for decisions as they relate to the finances of the company.
Yeah.
I rest my case.
Yeah, very good. This is why you have won me over with decision-making and responsibility. And the way I've heard your argument has been that authority is it's harder to define And whereas when you actually talk about who is responsible for a thing and how do decisions get made, you capture authority in a more easily to communicate way. And I am very pro this. And my argument is that beyond decision making and responsibility, there is this confidence thing about how a leader actually takes up their right to make decisions and be responsible for something, and also how they allow other people in their teams to feel like they're responsible for something and to make their own decisions. And that the feeling of confidence to do those things is authority. And so it's always my way, being an academic nerd, to always hold the vagaries of like what language can do, which is also have this word that holds that weird feeling that's kind of hard to define when you don't have it in a group, when you don't feel like you can go, actually, this is just the decision we need to make. Like that feeling, when it's not there, you feel it. And that authority is a really good word to explain that feeling. And hence why when we now tie ourselves in knots when we talk about this, because we go responsibility, decision-making, and authority.
Well, they're sort of, you can attack them from those three angles if you're trying to build an organization that has a sense of taking action, moving forward, making progress, that is reliant on some form of decisions and authority.
Here's an interesting question. It strikes me that your descriptor of what authority is as being really practical things about responsibility and decision making. There's something about it that really clicks with my experience of you as my leader when we worked together and you were my boss. Because your form of leadership was very, don't know how to describe it. You allowed things to get done. You helped us to get shit done. You celebrated us when we did stuff, but you didn't require the limelight on yourself. And I think that it's almost like the criticism of myself is the reason why I can't let go of authority is there's a part of me that likes to be the boss and likes to be the center of attention and sort of wants everyone to look at me and to know that I've got authority when I'm leading and I'm in control. And I'm wondering what your relationship is to like holding authority when you're leading groups of people. Like people thinking of you as the boss and looking towards you for like, you make decisions. Like, how comfortable are you with that?
I think I see it as a responsibility, which is why we throw these three words around. And it's not my responsibility to make all the decisions or instruct or control how other people are doing their work. But it is my responsibility to ensure that progress is made and move forward. And as a team, we collaborate together in a way that helps the business do what it wants to do. And there's a balance to find where you can't be a consensus-driven organization because you'll get nothing done. You need someone who is authorized with the responsibility of how the team performs to either beat tiebreak, make decisions that no one wants because it is the right thing for the team and the business, make changes that no one asked for. I always think of that Henry Ford example, like to be a leader and your responsibility isn't to do what everyone asks and build faster horses. It's to build what they need, which was to move faster. And so he came out with the car. Very simplified version of what that what happened there. But a leader's job, I'm going to go on my servant leadership tear. A leader's job is not to do what everybody around them asks them to do and just serve the people in the way that you might ask somebody who is waiting on you for a very specific thing. Their requirement is to bring you a very specific thing. To serve the group and to serve the company means sometimes you have to make people a bit uncomfortable or a bit unhappy in order, in the immediate term, in order to make actual progress.
Listeners, for those of you that are listening, G has some very spicy beliefs about the phrase servant leadership, and that she hates it.
I think it's driven this, you're either a servant leader where you do everything your team asks for, and I don't think that was the intent, but with the original thinking behind the idea of servant leadership. But that's sort of where it's gone. It's my expectation as an individual contributor is if my leader talks about being a servant leader, they're just going to do what I want. And it builds entitlement. It stalls progress because you can't please everybody in your team. And sometimes decisions have to be made that have no control over, like you have no control over because they're separate in the business or the market changed or something. And it sets a leader up for my job is to make my team happy all the time. And sometimes you have to make decisions that you're not happy with because you've run out of funding or the market shifted so much that you genuinely cannot afford to keep half the team. And you as a leader or executive in a company have to make very uncomfortable calls in order to sustain the business. And it's not ideal, but it's a reality of capitalist society.
Yeah, and we also saw a high degree of burnout bordering on abuse of leaders, particularly in the post, like mid to late COVID time when people in Australia were locked down. We saw like some pretty brutal things being done to servant leaders who were really wanting to serve their group and getting copping a lot of unconscious bad vibes and tension that was in the system because they were there encouraging people to see them as a servant. And I think that's when this tear started for both of us. It was more in you than it was in me because you've done formal management in an organization before, but it's definitely something that we both saw.
I think it bred entitlement and it built a unsafe environment because the expectation could never be met.
Yeah.
No one could ever be 100% happy when you're working in a business in a capitalist society where decisions have to get made. And it's unsafe to not know what your job is, how to do your job effectively, what it means to succeed, what it doesn't. And the result can be that none of that is ever said. And then one day it feels like your friend over there just got fired because you never knew performance was something that was never discussed until it was very private and very individual. Whereas for leaders who are more comfortable sharing, team, this is what success looks like for us, and I'm going to make this decision based on all the feedback you've given me. My view is not to ignore your team and not get any feedback from them. It's to ensure you're gathering all perspectives, but knowing that whichever decision is made, even if it feels like someone else in the group is, that you are responsible for it and that not everybody has to agree with it. Then you've got to get to that place where there is a safe enough place for discomfort.
Yeah.
In order to make progress.
And for authority to be taken up. I think my problem with servant leadership is less about the potential burnout of managers, although that's a very bad thing. And I really care about what words mean. And I really care about what metaphors are, because metaphors have meaning. So when you're saying, I am a leader who is a servant, can a servant decide where the master needs to be at 4:00 in the afternoon? No. The master decides what they are doing. So when you take on the role of servant leadership, you are, by the definition of the metaphor, giving away all authority to other people, in which authority is not part of their role. And authority is like it's not a it's not a universally wonderful thing. It's a hard thing to hold up. So if you're forcing authority onto people who it's not part of their job, it's your job to hold the authority. That's actually really dangerous. And I know I'm just re-arguing your point in a slightly different perspective, but I see this come up a lot in workplaces that are doing really amazing stuff to embrace neurodiversity, because a thing we know about creating a workplace that is sensitive not only to neurodiversity but is trauma informed and a whole bunch of other good things is having really clear boundaries where people know what the expectations are, and you're really honest about what those boundaries are, is way safer for everyone. So if someone has authority because they are a boss, then have authority. Don't say that you don't have it and then you're acting in service of a group of people, because part of your job is to tell that group of people what they need to do in order to achieve some thing. And the caveat that goes along with that is, of course, as much as you can, you want to be sharing that responsibility and sharing that authority to appropriate people to make certain decisions. But part of your job as a leader is to hold that authority that doesn't sit with anyone else. And denying it only potentially causes problems, I think.
Well, your responsibility is the success of the team or the organisation, depending on your level of seniority. And so you need to make a judgment call on whether the group or the loudest voice in the group is sharing the best idea for the team and the company. Because you're the one that's going to have to stand up and say to the hierarchy above you, it was the right decision, not because Joe over there said it the loudest and I don't like arguing with Joe, and Joe knows more than me. It's more that there was a sensible reason that was agreed to, not just by the team because Joe's the loudest, but because you as a leader knew it was right.
Do you think one of the reasons why it's hard to say the word authority is that we're a little bit in the leadership vernacular, in the modern let's talk about leadership thing, we're a bit scared of words like hierarchy and authority because it doesn't seem to be part of the trend now to use those words, that we have to be using more consensus and congenial language around leading in groups than actually saying, look, there's authority and look, there is a hierarchy.
Yes, I think what we're seeing now is one extreme or the other. A fear of being seen as authorizing or being the leader, and then moving into what we've talked about, servant leadership that doesn't actually help make progress. Because the other end of the pendulum is the big bad boss that gets hired above everybody that comes in and changes everything and fires everybody and makes it very unsafe because they've used their power and authority to make sweeping changes that weren't necessarily the best thing for the business or the government, which we're seeing in different places, and are not informed by what the people on the grounds doing the work are sharing.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is that leaders swing one way or the other, and it's very hard to sit effectively in the middle of holding your authority, making difficult decisions, having difficult conversations, having the confidence to do that, while also engaging with the smart people you've hired that you're trying to enable and grow and make progress with.
I think, I as you were talking, a light bulb went off in my brain. I think we've just done poor English when we've talked about servant leadership. Because actually what we're talking about is leadership that serves the needs of the group. Great. That is a good thing. Leadership should serve the needs of the group to achieve the task that it's doing. 100%. I think someone thought that thought and went, like a servant. Because it's got the same front of the word. It's like serve, but servant is a noun with a whole different set of meanings attached to it. It does not just mean person who serves the needs of a group. That, like, servant has a frilly hat. Do you know what I mean? And is called Jeeves.
Yeah. I think the original thinking was far more in line with what we want.
Yeah.
But it was taken and run with in a way that wasn't really helpful for leaders in positions of who wanted to be empathetic and build a culture that was safe enough to play with. Whether they knew that was the sentence they were trying to do or not.
Yeah. And this is the thing. What's the sentence about humans? This is why we can't have nice things. Once we start playing with a concept, I think it gets battered and turned around. And this is why I think, need to have healthy conversations where we remind people of what's the actual point that we were going for originally. And I think this connects to another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, can I do some history, G?
Oh, righto.
Okay, I'm going to do history anyway, because I can, because I like it. And I'm just going to put a caveat before I say this. This thought only just occurred to me. Usually, if I was giving a history lesson beforehand, I would go and I would check all my dates and things. So, except that people should Google some of these words that are coming up. But, do you know, when I say the word Taylorism, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, please explain for the listeners.
Okay, I've really put myself in the hole here. Mr. Taylor. I've forgotten Taylor's first name.
Yeah.
Taylor was a dude. Taylor believed things about how people work. I'm going to give you a time frame, and I'm probably going to get it wrong. We're thinking sort of turn of last century. So your 18s, 19s, maybe a little bit further than that, maybe a little bit back. Sometime around then.
Sometime in the past.
In the past. Past person, look, there were trains, and there were definitely elevators in this time, yeah?
Okay,
so,
right.
Around then. Taylor believed in a thing called scientific management theory, which was essentially the job of a manager is to always create more efficiency. So if you can make the most efficient working system, then you can make magic, and is famous for studying the amount of time that it took for screws to be turned and changing the amount of threads on a screw in order to increase productivity. It was like super nerd for the details of exactly what it took to do every task. Took these theories out of factories and brought them into like thought-based jobs as well, and came up with some pretty terrible ideas. Like took that to its logical conclusion, decided that managers and non-managers needed to have different lifts in an office building so as they would never interact with each other, because that would cause like bad data transfer and you needed to keep them separate. Made for a lot of brutal things. It was fairly terrible, and it was based, I mean, when we think about command and control and we think about authority in a bad way, bad authority, bad command and control. By the way, that's very brutal. There is some nuance in what Taylor did, but generally we think Taylor did some not nice things to workers. And I think part of our thing now, where we're so scared about authority and hierarchy, is our collective imaginations remember this time when authority and hierarchy was really brutal and did a lot of terrible things in the working system. And we now, the pendulum is swinging, and we don't want to touch anything that's associated with it. And the problem with that is authority and hierarchy is not necessarily bad. The way they're used is bad, but as just a concept, they are morally agnostic. So they can be used good and bad. And I think I have seen the most often when I see pain caused in working systems, it's when systems are underbounded, deauthorized, and the hierarchy is really unclear. And that then chaos happens and people hurt each other because no one actually knows the rules. People are saying terrible things that they shouldn't be saying because no one's actually being like, you can't do that kind of behavior at work. Like, I think
no one had defined it in the first place.
Yeah. And I think what we've thrown out, we need to become friends again with words like authority. What we don't want is bad authority. What we don't want is bad hierarchy. But when those things are deployed well and potentially sparingly, they really help a group get shit done. Rant!
Fabulous. I was on a panel the other night with a bunch of leaders, and someone asked the question. It was a leadership event, and each one of the four of us had been talking about leadership. And someone asked the question, you've talked about formal leadership. What about a hierarchy-less organization where everybody's on the same level and everything's fine? Well, all four members of the panel, in different ways, answered when it's tried, it doesn't work. My perspective was I've worked in places that thought of themselves as flat as you can be. But ultimately, people need some form of direction once you hit a certain size because you need to be heading in the same direction. Or you've got 100 CEOs. But there's also the other complicating factor where companies have liabilities and you need to put those liabilities into responsibilities. Money and the law being one of them. It's not fair to ask somebody whose day job is seen at the same level of hierarchy, but day to day they're managing the office, or that's actually a bad example. They're taking on a product design role and then being asked to have equal responsibility for the financial liability of the company. The thing about specializing means that there has to be some form of authority because you've got to have enough money to pay the people in the product team, and therefore the leader in finance needs to take on that responsibility and be culpable if they stuff it up.
Yeah. And then because of that, they have the authority to pull the emergency cord if something bad is coming down the road, which I would argue in a good system, there's a whole bunch of people with the authority to pull that cord about a whole bunch of different things. I just recently spoke to someone whose organization ceased to exist because the eyes didn't see a financial problem coming further down the road, and then no more. And then when the organization ceases to exist because of it, people go, well, someone should have seen it. You're like, yes, they should have. That's authority. Like, that is authority. That's why you need it. You need people watching the things, watching the gauges.
Because in that situation, I've worked in a company where a similar sort of thing happened. And in that situation, we needed the leader to know when and how to call it. And in that situation, the company still exists, but it needed to be downsized massively because the environment around us changed in a way that no one predicted. And that person needed to be able to stand up and say, to take care of the humans here, I'm not pretending that the economic situation is any different to what it is. And so we need to make some form of change. Just waiting to run out of money is not the way. That's what would happen if you had 50 leaders in a 50-person company.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk about big examples of, those are really big, very clear examples of how why authority is important. And I also think that there are also very big bad problems that don't necessarily end in such a sharp end to an organization, but will contribute to the end of an organization. For example, when a group of people who need to do a task, like improve the product, don't feel that they have the authority to make the changes that they need to make. You know what I mean? Like, those are more silent deaths, silent, slow deaths. But I think it's more than just financial existential problems. It's also like humans' ability to actually feel like they can achieve something in a group of people. That's still existential.
Oh, it is. It's just that the perspective is changed because it doesn't feel existential because it is slower. But slower often means far more expensive. Because time is money, people. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's... So when we talk about authority, there's two roads down which my brain wants to go right now, G. Which road should we go? I'm going to give you two options.
Okay.
There's one part of my brain that's like, I think talking about some of the ways that a lack of well-defined authority, decision-making, and responsibility can show up in your company, like the little warning signals. I think that's really important. And then my other question, which is a bit of a spicy one, is to do with, we are two people that have two different gender identities, you and we were raised in those different gender identities. And I think that there is a thing about how little boys and little girls are raised in Western society and their relationship to authority that I think is very interesting. And I think it even comes out in our organization where I'm like, authority, yeah, let's call it authority and take authority and da pa 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 pa. I think that's based on having been a little boy and having been told and shown examples of the right type of masculinity, which was the captain of the football team, He-Man. You were never your example. Sorry, I've already gone down this one. So this is the one. I'm so sorry, but it's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, go.
When I was growing up, none of the heroes that I were presented that were my gender were like the third person down from the leader of the group. Do you know what I mean? There was no like, He-Man, but then He-Man's third person that made sure that, the cat got fed at night. That wasn't the hero that I was to look up to. I was to look up to the person with the most authority. All of our games were about how do you take authority, usually by physical means, by elbows and such. And so I think there's something, it touches on gender, I think, in some way.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Because as you were talking, I was like, what from my childhood is standing out about and I went to people doing cool stuff together. And the two examples that came to mind were the Power Rangers and Captain Planet.
Tell me what they were.
In both those situations, there was a group of people. There were leaders or whatever, because there was Captain Planet. But in those situations, I was more thinking about the team of people who took on different roles.
Yeah.
And that's how they achieved greatness.
Isn't that interesting? So can I just get this clear in my head? Your thought process led you to looking at groups of people that achieved authority and power rather than individual heroes.
Well, I grew up in the 90s. That's when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to think of a woman or women in power at that time.
Oh, totally.
I mean, Margaret Thatcher was around, but she was on the other side of the world and the internet didn't exist. And whatever your politics are, she was very far away.
Yeah.
Other than that, sports teams on the telly were all men.
Yeah.
Politicians, all men.
Yeah.
Companies were all run by men that were made onto the news in the 90s.
Yeah.
So where do I go to? I go to the things that I was exposed to as a kid.
Yeah.
And, you know, even then, Baba was one of our favourite shows. Or Baba. I don't know how different people pronounce it, but we pronounce it Baba in my house. And it was the kingdom of Baba.
Yeah.
Even though Celeste was there, she was doing stuff. She was mothering.
Yeah. Well, the show was called Baba.
Exactly. It wasn't called Baba and Celeste.
It wasn't Celeste, the Celeste Hour.
No.
But what's so interesting about those heroes that you mentioned as well is Captain Planet is such an interesting superhero because Captain Planet only exists when a group of 5 people summon and get this. Oh, get this. Do you know who is more powerful than Captain Planet? Who's more powerful than Captain Planet in the Captain Planet universe?
Planet?
The Earth, who is Gaia.
Yeah.
Gaia, the spirit of the Earth, who makes the rings that can make Captain Planet.
Yeah.
And it is about a group of people sharing. Gaia could have gone. Gaia is so strong that Gaia could have fucked up any one of those bad people in the show. But Gaia didn't do that, did Gaia? Gaia made some rings, gave them to people and said, here's this power. Try and solve your own problems. And if you really need help, powers combined, and then this dude over here will smack some things up for a while.
Yeah.
And even Power Rangers. I know the Red Ranger was always the leader, and usually I think all times was a male, I think. But
I don't remember that from the story. Not because it wasn't true, but because my memory was based on a team of people.
Now, I'm probably wrong. There probably was a leader ranger who was red who wasn't a male. One hopes. One hopes. But they all have to make pieces of the thing that come together to make one whole. Now, admittedly, I think the head has a sweeter deal than the leg. You know? Very interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, we went on to nerd about children's TV shows. But
we did.
Do you think that there is, even in our relationship, do you think that one of the reasons why there's a different relationship to authority is because of our gender?
Yeah, yes. And I get on my high horse about servant leadership because I don't think you need to. Being a empathetic, lovely, kind person does not have to be mutually exclusive from holding your authority and making decisions and not being liked. And there is a gendered tendency. And I would say there is a group of men that I have worked with over my career that want to be seen far more like the nice guy that lean that way in their leadership style.
Lean what way in their leadership style?
Lean the way of the empathetic. I will serve the group rather than...
Yeah.
No, I will be a servant to the group rather than I will serve the group.
Yeah.
English. How does it work?
Yeah, I remember when we were working together, you had to beat out of me my tendency to refer to our work as my work whenever we talk to the group.
Which is a really interesting thing. I have been comfortable in support roles, possibly more comfortable than the standing up, being CEO type person. But in doing that, there is, while I am comfortable holding the responsibility, the recognition needs to be shared amongst all the people that worked on it. Because something that always got up my goat is when, is that even the same? Is when a leader would take credit for the work but not responsibility when it's stuffed up. Like that combination is just not good for people working.
Yeah. Totally. And for me, it was a really interesting thing because I'd been used to working by myself, so I was in my language a lot. But it felt, when you would point it out to me, I'd be like, I didn't even know I did it. I didn't even know I did it. It didn't even compute to me, because I think that I am so programmed to have the hero complex, because that's what we were given as children. Look at all the heroes that change, and that's the only way to have been effective, is if you're the hero of this story, rather than I'm one of the people. I'm one of the Captain Planet crew, as opposed to I am Captain Planet, you know? Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. Authority, complex. Hey, should we talk
Complex.
quickly about this thing, about the thing?
Are you
Sorry,
moving?
should we talk quickly about the, like, how does it show up in groups, and then do a bit of a, like, what can you do?
Yeah,
kind of vibe?
yes, great. Because ending with what can we do? Go, Steffi, go.
Great. I'm just going to say some things for people who are listening and thinking, yeah, authority is really complex, but how do I know if maybe it needs a bit of attention? And I think here are some really quick ones. If you see people working on a project but not actually doing anything, so they're working for a long time but not taking any actions, if people are solving the same problem and they have different jobs and they're getting in their way, if people are becoming passive and complaining about problems but not choosing to solve them, if managers are having to micromanage all the time just to get things done, if approval is constantly being asked of people that are really distant from where the work is, usually that means pretty high up in hierarchy. They're being asked to approve things that they shouldn't have to approve. And if you have a lot of people who are leaving your company and saying that they feel a lack of impact, and many more things, you might be having something show up in your organization where authority is a bit something. And we think that there are some things that you can do to explore this. Number one, before I get to our list of three, because we always give lists of three, I learned this from G. First thing you can do is go talk to people. So we do a lot of interviewing when we enter systems, and actually sitting down and talking to people about authority, how decisions get made, and how responsible they feel for their work can be really interesting. And being really curious, taking notes and learning, I think is a great idea. We think that you can split work on increasing healthy authority in your group in three ways. Number one, we think making really clear how decisions get made is really important. G, you said something. I wrote a thing on this and I said, yeah, you should make your own process and you should work with people and make sure it's really clear. And then you said a smart thing.
Oh, there are so many frameworks out there you can borrow that people have taught. Like, if you find that decisions aren't getting made, or you're relying on consensus, or progress is not being brought forward, then allocate people's roles and responsibility within a decision framework and then try and hold that group accountable.
Yeah. Classic me trying to be the hero. Hey, I decided I had to invent my own one. And you were like, they already exist. Cool ones to have a look at, Racy or Daisy. If you just type that into your Googles, you'll find out all the detail about them. RACI or DACI, they're two really good ones to start your journey. But more importantly than the framework you pick, you have to do things that show your group that you are using them, which means do a workshop, write a post, present in a meeting. But whatever you do, make it really clear that this is the framework we're using, and celebrate people when they use it for the first time, particularly if they use it badly. Because if they use it badly and you go, good work for using that new process, you are showing the whole group that the thing you care about is that the process gets used. And people will get better as they start to use the process more. But you need to hero those people so that everyone chooses to follow them. Great. Make decisions clear. That's number one. Number two, responsibility. Responsibility is a really interesting thing. You need to acknowledge that people in your group have different responsibilities for their work, and you need to allow them to have that responsibility. The thing that G said earlier about managers and leaders taking responsibility when something goes well and not taking it when something goes badly, this is very bad. You need to be a leader that allows people to feel there's meaning in their task. And a simple way of that is celebrating people when they have successes. The super hard level is allowing people to also own their mistakes, because mistakes are learning opportunities. And if you take it from them, you don't allow them to see meaning in what they're doing and to learn from those things. Now, does that mean dragging them across the coals? No. I would argue a good leader takes responsibility with the people, but they allow the person to both feel their successes and their failures, because that makes someone engage in the game of work because there's meaning. Anything to add to that, G?
Go. What's the third one? We like threes in this place.
Great. Confidence. Now, this is confidence is a really weird thing. Confidence is not something that you get confidence and then you use it to be able to do something. Confidence happens when you don't have confidence to take an action and you take the action anyway. And in that moment, that's weirdly when you get confidence. So it can be really hard to foster in people, but it is not impossible. As we always say, should be a drinking game when you listen to this podcast, that when we mention the term reflective practice, you take a shot of wheatgrass, because reflective practice allows people to clock and acknowledge the moments that they took steps that required confidence. And if you allow them afterwards to talk about that experience, they're going to clock that it happened, and then they're going to see it happen more. And then confidence will become a conscious process of growing in the individual. But you have to set up instances where you sit down and think with them about when they have shown confidence to take actions. Do those three things, and you're going to start playing with increasing the level of authority in your group. And it'll be great. Oh, the point we'll add on top of that is everything that I just said for your people, you need to do for yourself, though. You can't do this with other people if you're not doing this stuff yourself, particularly the confidence building one. So you need to look at yourself first, because you're the leader. So you go first.
To lead is to go first. Very good. Well, that brings us to the end of our rambly rant times. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We like to end...
G, thank you for joining me here now in this moment. It's been just so lovely.
Thank you too, Steph. We like to leave you all with the optimistic or inspirational saying, let's go build some flying cars.
Oh, mate, magic.
That was nice, wasn't it?